Another day, another job. It would be nice to find something more reliable one day, ideally with a low mortality rate and paid time off. Instead, Jake and I have made our way through so many career fields that I can barely keep track at this point. We have been crime scene cleaners, construction workers, bartenders, and hell, even a one-time amateur exorcist. Don't ask about that one. Though I will say the papacy might forgive our transgressions if they saw our results. Anyway, Jake and I found ourselves in need of work again. This last job didn't last long and it was strange even by our standards. It was another cleaning gig and we figured that despite the odd description and the admittedly creepy location of an abandoned building near town, it would be alright. At least there would be no blood and bodies to clean up, and hopefully no cursed dolls hiding around in the basement either. It was about a month ago and we were looking around and found an odd listing about a cleaning crew needed for an old flea market close to downtown. Just some cover-up painting. Not a big deal considering what we had done before, and the pay was surprisingly good for such a simple job. We jumped at the chance when we found it, since it would be the first decent payday in a while. Jake and I took the van out of the building to meet the contact for the position. Jake was grinning like he always did when we were going to a new job. At this point, I figured that he got some masochistic joy out of the idea that everything might unravel around us like a curse. I was just excited for another paycheck, even if it was another cleaning gig. "Oh, come on, man. I'm sure this one will be on the level," Jake said, trying to cheer me up while frantically switching through songs on his playlist. He finally settled on Battery by Metallica, and before he cranked up the volume, he continued. "I mean, after all, what's the worst?" "Don't finish that sentence." I snapped back at him, but he just shrugged and drowned out my concern with the song. We rode on for a while longer, seeing the telltale signs of dilapidated buildings, which assured us that we were getting close. Jake checked the directions again. "Yeah, this is it up ahead. The old Mayhew's flea market. I'm shocked this place closed. Who would pass up on such fine offerings?" He chuckled sarcastically while pointing to an old defaced sign of an unpleasant-looking man in an ill-fitting suit. Jake had a point. The marketing sucked as much as the location. We parked in a lot just outside of the condemned building. Now that we were closer, I saw that the place was fairly large, which made sense if it had been a bigger market in the past. The entire building was in a sorry state now, though. Many windows were broken and boards were haphazardly nailed over sections, and the whole place looked like a light breeze could topple it. As I looked on, I saw that nearly every square inch of the place was tagged or covered in graffiti. There was also a strange ring of what looked like white paint on the ground that seemed to circle the perimeter. I wondered why somebody would want us to clean the place and not just tear it down and start again somewhere better. But I supposed it didn't matter. We were there and ready to work, assuming this job really was on the level. I wanted to get down to it as soon as possible. In the next few minutes, another car pulled up. It was a well-maintained, if not a little dated, Oldsmobile, still looking sharp despite its best years being behind it. A tall man wearing a cowboy hat stepped out of the car and walked over to us. "Howdy, boys. The name's Earl Mayhew. It's good to meet ya." Jake stepped forward and immediately shook the man's hand and gave a sarcastic, "Well, howdy, Earl. Name's Jake, and this here's my friend." I cringed at the awful accent that Jake was attempting, and I hoped that it wouldn't offend our new client. Instead, Mr. Mayhew just laughed and slapped his knee. I held out my hand, and before I could say anything, Mr. Mayhew walked past me and towards the building. "Well then, now that the introductions are out of the way, please follow me." I can show you the place and you fellas can decide if y'all are interested in the job." He moved on towards the building, and we shrugged and followed. Mayhew rummaged through his pocket for a moment and produced a key that he used to open a large padlock on the front door. Before stepping inside, he peeked in and looked around as if expecting something, and then he finally moved in and gestured for us to follow. "Oh, I know she doesn't look like much these days, but we had a lot of good times. I just can't bear the idea of selling the place. This used to be one of the most successful flea markets in the county. We had people from all over the state, hundreds of vendors and clients, but that was then." Mayhew sighed ruefully and looked like he had forgotten where we were that moment. He snapped back to the present and regarded us. "Oh, sorry boys, lots of memories. Anyway, come this way and I'll show you the real meat and potatoes of what I need done." We followed him down a dimly lit hall and into a wide open central plaza that was covered in debris. Almost every surface was plastered with some measure of graffiti. "Yeah, it's definitely a fixer-upper," Jake mumbled. Mayhew must have heard him and his eyes narrowed. And Jake caught himself and blurted out apologetically, "Hey, but it has good bones and good character. No wonder you want to preserve it." Mayhew nodded and continued on. And Jake shot me a lame thumbs up and I rolled my eyes. We stopped again and Mayhew looked around, examining particular walls and parts of the floor with care. I was about to ask what he was looking for when he held up a hand and then pointed at a spot on the wall. "There, right there. That is what I need you gentlemen to take care of." I looked at the odd spots on the wall and I was confused. "What is that?" I asked, unable to hide my confusion. "That is what you'll need to clean. This place has been turned over recently, believe it or not. I even have a crew working nights out here. No matter how much we cover it, it comes back. I need you two to cover it up before." He paused, looking nervous. "Before what?" Jake asked. "Well, before it changes," Mayhew finished. And we both looked at him incredulously. "Changes?" I tried to clarify. Yeah, I know it sounds crazy, but this art, if you can call it that, it can change. It spreads all the time, slow and steady like. If it ain't cleaned up, it eventually transforms. When the images start forming." Mayhew paused and it looked like he was trying to suppress an involuntary shudder. "Well, it's best not to let it come to that. We've had some incidents before when it did." I didn't like the way that he had said incident. "But it won't be an issue if y'all are thorough. I just need you fellas to handle the paint. It has to be paint that covers it and not any cheap stuff. It seems as long as we use the decent stuff, it holds it off longer. We tried throwing paint thinner at it in case it might work to wear it down faster, but unfortunately it wouldn't stop the spread. So I was left with gallons of the stuff that I had to store in the main hallway. Once I get the funds ready, I'm going to wallpaper the bejesus out of this place and replace all the flooring and see how that thing likes it." He slapped his knee and laughed again, but he stopped to cough awkwardly. I was confused. What was that thing he was referring to? It felt like there was a detail that he was omitting. Mayhew straightened his jacket and continued. "So fellas, what will it be? Just a few weeks of painting and I'm willing to pay you the whole salary of the last crew of 5 people. He held out a piece of paper and I collected it before Jake could. He looked over my shoulder and mumbled a soft, "Whoa," when he saw the pay. I tried to suppress my own excitement. It was double what we had made on our last job for only a couple of weeks of work. "Yeah, count on us, sir," we said almost in unison. "Excellent, boys. Happy to be doing business with ya. You can start tomorrow. I just have to work out a few things with the other crew and you guys will be in business. Come by bright and early tomorrow, say 6 a.m., and we can go over the particulars." We arrived early the next day as requested. I was still feeling groggy and I hammered back an energy drink before stepping out of the van. Jake seemed oddly energized and leapt out as soon as we had arrived, nearly tripping as we went. Mr. Mayhew was waiting there for us. He looked disturbed by something and he was kneeling down with a tape measure and shaking his head. There was an odd patch of what looked like dark paint that was on the ground near the white ring. As we approached, I heard him mumbling something in frustration about an artistic thing. I cleared my throat to get his attention and called out, "Hey, Mr. Mayhew, good morning." He looked up and the look of concern vanished, replaced by his practiced businessman smile. "Oh, hey, boys, thanks for coming. Alright, so down to business. I'm gonna go over a few things, so please save your questions for the end. I need y'all to listen and remember these things, alright?" We both agreed and Mayhew continued. "Y'all be spending most of your shift painting. Not some normal painting job, but try and think of this one as having a moving target. For a little backstory on how we got here, a long time ago we had a vendor here. She claimed she was an artist, but she was really more of a witch. Now I know it sounds crazy, but it's the God-honest truth, and she caused a whole lot of trouble. Eventually, she cursed this whole place when things changed in a way she didn't like, and at some point she disappeared. Ever since then, this paint keeps finding its way onto the walls, the ceilings, and even the floors." He gestured around and then I noticed the outline of 3 human faces staring down at us from the ceiling. They didn't have features, but the lack of eyes and mouths made them even more unsettling to look at. Like those." I pointed up above us and Mayhew looked up and cried out, "Oh, Jesus H. Christ, yes, like that. Let's step out of here for now, fellas." We followed him as he rushed out, with a look of genuine fear clinging to him as we fled. We moved out into the parking lot and he let out a wheezing gasp. "No, sorry about that, that just startled me is all. Anyway, this artist, she's been leaving these paintings and been having folks cover them up every day, and they just keep coming back. For a while I decided to leave it, but then bad things started to happen. Sellers started to leave and called it unsafe." He spat on the ground and grimaced, and then people started seeing things and getting hurt. Finally, an incident happened that ended up closing us down for good. Since then, though, I hold out hope that something can be done to save the place. But I can't just leave it. That thing, it's not content staying here. Every day that art, it creeps a bit closer to the outside, and the details become a little bit clearer. When those details are clear, if you see them well, something bad happens and something that is better covered up. That's why I need you boys and the other cleaners." He cleared his throat and looked troubled. I was trying to digest the crazy story and so was Jake. Mayhew asserted his confidence again and continued. "Whatever this stuff is, it's unsafe. As bad as black mold and just as spreading. Paint over any and all of it that you see, but just be careful it don't spread out beyond this circle. Cover that mess up first." He pointed to a line in the lot snaking out from the building. "And the most important thing, if you see any faces or outlines like back in that room, cover them up right away. Don't wait. If eyes start to form or worse, the mouse." He paused again, suppressing a shudder. "Well, just cover them up. And don't listen to anyone or anything else besides each other and me. Otherwise, easy as pie, right? You guys do this well and it looks good after the first day, you can even get a bonus. But I do need y'all to sign this contract. I like to offer my people true employment." He held out some paper and Jake scoffed. "We are independent contractors first and foremost." The indignance in his voice surprised me, and for a moment I thought that it might actually be a deal breaker. And then Jake chuckled as Mayhew looked dumbstruck. "Oh, I'm just yanking your chain. Yeah, bring on the paperwork. Do we get health care?" Mayhew smiled again and laughed along. Fill out the paperwork and you can be eligible for health coverage, LTD, and life insurance. Mayhew showed us to a small picnic table set up near the outside of the building, and we filled out the paperwork. I saw something odd in the life insurance policy. It indicated that the placeholder beneficiary was Mayhew Industries. It seemed a bit odd, and so I asked him about it. Mr. Mayhew, this paper says the company holds our life insurance policy first. When does that change? Oh, that, he said dismissively. Oh, it's just standard policy. First 2 weeks we hold the account and securities until it transfers to your beneficiary. It seemed odd, and I was about to tell Jake to hold off. But I looked over and he had finished and was already handing his completed papers back to Mr. Mayhew. I sighed and then finished signing my own. After all, how bad could a painting job be? After it was all settled, Mr. Mayhew showed us to a small storage shed that had dozens, if not hundreds of cans of white paint inside. There were also rollers, pans, brushes, anything a painter might need. This should all be good to get you started. Use as much as you need. A thicker coat seemed to take longer for that damn stuff to show through. Have fun, guys, and be careful. I would hate to lose you too. He walked out to his car, moving in an odd pattern, as if avoiding the path that we had taken to get in. I noticed the line of paint that had been there before was gone, or rather it had curved off in a new direction, oddly pointing towards the way that Mr. Mayhew was leaving. I ignored the eerie sight and I asked Jake, "Are you worried about that last thing that he said? About losing us too?" He shrugged. "I don't know, but what I do know is I call not painting over those creepy faces on the ceiling." He nearly doubled over laughing as I held my face in my palms. I could already tell this would be as exciting as watching paint dry. We started work quickly. All the supplies were conveniently located, and it was not long before we had covered up the oddly snaking trail of dark paint that had been creeping out of the building with the white cover-up. "I'm not sure what that guy was talking about. This is going great. It's not like this stuff is actively moving. Come on, let's go inside and work on the other rooms." And Jake was right. Since Mr. Mayhew didn't care about how careful we were, it was coming along nice and quick. We opened the front door and nearly fell back in unison. There, inside the entryway, which had been a fading white just an hour ago, it now showed murals of dozens of people and dozens of empty faces in that streaking black paint. All of them looking at us from the walls, the ceiling, and even up from the floor. Okay, so that's not ideal. I mumbled as we observed the impossible change. The new paint glistened and it seemed to have an eerie aura, like it had only stopped moving because we had arrived to look at it. "Oh well, shit," Jake exclaimed. "It always has to be something though, at least the old guy was honest with us. Seems we just need to cover this stuff up, or at least do as much as we can, so let's get going." Suddenly, he rushed forward with a paint roller in hand, and he dragged it along the surface of one of the new paintings. I couldn't be sure, but I thought that I felt a disturbing sense of pressure build up when he covered the area where the eyes and the face of one of the images had been. I was disturbed, but in the moment, I managed the same resolve that Jake had. We were there and we had seen crazy stuff before, plus we needed the money. I took a deep breath, opened a fresh can of paint, and I got to work. At the rate that we were going, we could get a lot done by the evening and get that bonus. Oh, we were wrong though, so wrong. Nearly 10 hours had passed and only one room looked complete. Jake and I were reluctant to leave the room unattended, since we both suspected that as soon as we did, the insidious black paint would come washing back in to undo all of our work. This is crazy, man. What the hell is going on? Some kind of haunting to wreck this guy's resale value. I mean, at least it's not attacking us, but it just keeps undoing our work. Jake shouted at the wall and kicked a can of paint towards the corner that he had just finished. It had already started to show new black streaks beneath the surface. I know this feels hopeless, but we get paid by the hour, so even without a bonus, the money is still good. Come on, I think the evening shift should be here soon, I said, trying to reassure him. We left our supplies in the hall and walked out to the parking lot. As we neared the exit, we heard a voice shout from outside. "Nathan, where are you? You need to get out of there, it's not safe." Jake and I looked at each other confused. We exited the building and saw a truck parked next to our van and a man shouting at the building, but not moving past the painted perimeter. "Hey, there's no Nathan here, but are you one of the evening crew here to take over?" I asked him, but he seemed surprised at my assertion and looked confused and then horrified. Oh no, no. He brought other people here. Oh God, please tell me that you saw Nathan in there. We need to get him out. He's been in there since last night." "Whoa, slow down, dude," Jake said, trying to reassure the panic-stricken man. "We've been painting all day here and your friend's not inside, and we would have seen him. Who are you and what's going on? Mayhew said a night shift would be here to take over." The man took a deep breath and spoke in a strained whisper. My name is Roger, and Nathan is my friend and fellow painter. We were hired to paint over the weird art in this building by Mr. Mayhew. That was what we were doing. Well, until something happened last night. Nathan didn't get out. Something happened and I can't remember." He looked confused and then frightened again as he struggled to recall. "I don't know what happened. When I woke up, I was back home. I tried to call Nathan, but he didn't respond. And then I started to remember things. Flashing images of faces, and Nathan staring at a wall with his eyes all messed up. I don't know what the hell is going on, but we need to get him out of there now." Before we could ask him another question, Roger forgot his apprehension about the paint perimeter and bolted past us, shouting for his friend. "Shall we?" Jake smiled and ran after the screaming painter, back into the haunted building to look for his friend. I groaned and then followed him. As soon as we had made it into the building, something felt off. The smell of fresh paint was stronger, but it also had a bizarre tinge to it, like something else was in the air. I looked with disturbed fascination at the areas that we had just painted over, and I saw the black, tar-like fluid oozing down the walls. Jake ignored the disturbing sight and rushed ahead, trying to catch up with Roger. I caught up with him around the corner, but Roger was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, there was a shaking in the building's walls, and we retreated back to the front door, fearing a structural collapse. After a tenuous moment, I looked at the front door. There is a snaking line of paint emerging from the ground and merging into an inky black canvas that had erased most of the door's features. It was so much worse, actually seeing the paint move. It was like a living creature, and watching it gave me a terrible headache. Jake was staring at it too, a little too intently. I shoved his shoulder and he blinked and he shrugged off the effect. "Let's prop the door open," I suggested. I didn't like the idea of this image forming on the door and being stuck in here with it. I pulled at the handles and the door held firm. There was a disturbing squishing sound, and suddenly, I fell back gasping as a living portrait of a face opened its eyes and looked back at me from where the plain door had been. I was horrified but oddly mesmerized by the shifting patterns in the faces. I knew that I shouldn't be looking at it, but how could I not look at something so miraculous? I started leaning closer to the face. I needed to see more. Suddenly, a hand fell on my shoulder and I was pulled backward and onto the ground, landing hard and snapping out of my daze. "Oh, none of that possession shit, man. Don't look at the thing, come on. Let's try a window or something. This place is screwed and whatever's happening, I don't want to be stuck here." Jake said. I staggered to my feet and shook my head. I almost looked back at the undulating face on the door, and I swear that I felt some invisible hand reaching out to touch my mind. I shuddered and backed away. We found a window, but it was black on the other side. I had a bad feeling about what that implied. Suddenly, Jake was next to me, holding a brick that he had scavenged from somewhere and readying it. "Here's to hoping," he said while hurling it at the glass. I was happy to hear the satisfying sound of shattering glass, but horrified when instead of daylight coming in, waves of black paint began pouring from the window. "Are you kidding me?" And Jake shouted in disbelief. "Come on, let's get away from this one. Maybe if we find those other guys, they can tell us what the hell is really going on and how we can get out," I said while moving on. Eventually, we heard something near the west wing and followed the dark halls to it. It sounded like low, muffled gasps of pain, and when we emerged into the room, we saw something horrifying. Roger was there, splayed out and cut open by something. His body was positioned like a morbid statue, and a terrible wound was gouged into his torso, which looked like it had almost disemboweled him. Horrifically, he seemed to still be alive, and we approached slowly and he mumbled a weak groan of agony. "Holy shit, what happened here?" Jake managed to spit out, and I echoed the sentiment. We got closer and Roger's eyes finally rolled forward out of the back of his head and faced us. He groaned and mumbled, and we could tell that he was trying to speak. "Go. Not safe. Nathan is here, but something else." He fell silent, but his eyes remained open. He was dead. "Oh hell, man, what happened to him?" Jake asked in a panic. I had no idea either and was trying to reconcile just what we had seen. We looked around in paranoid confusion when we heard something that terrified us even more than the silence. Footsteps. "Did you bring the insurance?" I asked Jake in a terrified whisper. There was a long pause while I looked at him and my heart sank. "I did, yeah, it's just in the van," he said while flashing a pained smile. "Of course," I groaned, not really knowing if having a gun like the insurance would help against sentient paint and whatever things were at work in this building. "Well, come on then, we can't stay here. Let's try and find a way out." Jake nodded and together we crept out of the room, leaving the bloodied body of Roger behind us. We found another window and I didn't see any shifting, monstrous visage behind it, so I figured that was a start. I found a large piece of rebar nearby and I hefted it up. "Nice, man, let's give it a shot. Crack it open," Jake whispered. I held the bar and swung as hard as I could. The glass shattered and the darkness behind the glass gave way to a more natural glow of twilight. We could get out this way. I used the bar to clear the glass out of the frame. It was a tight fit, but I figured we could both get out of the building and this lot before calling Mayhew and telling him the bad news. Just as the way was clear and I was pulling myself up and out of the building, I heard footsteps again. I looked down the hall and saw a figure emerging from one of the adjacent rooms. There was a low, groaning, creaking sound, like the rusty hinge of a door. The terrible sound echoed as the figure walked along in what looked like pain. "Shit, move, move, move." Jake shouted at me and I hoisted myself up just in time to meet a dark wall of human faces. I sat there straddling the wall and looking in disbelief as the tortured faces of dozens of people stared back at me. All as one, they wailed a pained cacophony that nearly ruptured my eardrums. I fell off the windowsill and I landed hard, but the pain in my body from landing was secondary to the pain in my ears. The awful sound that those torturous half-faces bellowed had stunned me. I stared up dumbly at the broken window as if expecting them to be gone. But the leering faces looked down at me, and I swear they started to laugh. Before I knew what was happening, I could hear again. and I heard Jake shouting at me and hoisting me back to my feet. "Come on, man. I said come on." He pulled me up and we started to sprint away from the wall of faces. When I looked back, I saw the figure slowly moving towards us. A faint glow of inky tendrils trailed behind him, covering the walls, floor, and ceiling with more of that terrible paint. We rushed on, but the path led to a large double door that was padlocked and barred. "Oh shit, what now?" Jake said, struggling for words and as scared and desperate as I was feeling. My mind was finally recovering, and I noticed that we passed 2 doors in our attempted flight from the building. "This way," I told him, as we moved reluctantly back towards our pursuer. We ducked into one of the rooms and closed the door just as I heard the awful creaking and groaning sound getting closer. The room was small and had old filing cabinets and 2 busted down desks. We took cover under one of them and tried to stifle our strange breathing as we waited to see if the thing would follow us in. For several minutes, we sat there in panicked anticipation. As we waited, I saw something in a half-closed drawer. It looked like a small silver locket. I reached into the drawer and it made a slight noise that Jake nearly freaked out about. I shrugged apologetically and removed the locket. I opened it and saw the portraits of 2 young women. I turned it over in my hand and saw that the locket had likely been a gift. There was an engraving which read, "To Lily, my sister and my muse. Love, Sam." "What's that?" Jake asked. "I'm not sure what it is or how it got here, but something about the face in this locket feels weirdly familiar." Jake frowned. "Alright man, just don't put it on or get possessed by some ghost girl. I'm not gonna deal with that tonight." I agreed and nearly laughed at the absurdity of our situation. For a moment I thought that it might be safe to leave, that maybe we had given our pursuer the slip. I was just about to stand up when the door handle rattled. The door opened with a terrible creak and we both knew that the thing was in the room now. The smell of old paper was replaced by the sickly sweet smell of something rotting, as well as the strong fumes of fresh paint following close behind. I couldn't bring myself to look over the desk. It was in here now. Jake sat next to me shivering but trying to stay silent too. His eyes bulged suddenly and I stole a glance at what he was looking at. It was a snaking tendril of paint that moved past the desk that we hid behind and slowly climbed up the adjacent wall. We heard shambling steps in the room and a terrible gasping sound like a person struggling to breathe. Eventually, the paint on the wall began to take shape and form into the silhouette of a face. Jake shook his head and closed his eyes. I knew that we shouldn't look back, but if we stayed in that place, we would have no choice but to. I had an idea then, and it was a bad idea, but we were in trouble if we didn't do something. As the face began to form, I knew whatever it was would see us, and so I leapt forward and put my back to the face to try to cover its eyes. My plan would have worked, but I tripped and stumbled, knocking a small stack of papers over in the effort. I held my breath, but I heard the footsteps getting closer again. I knew the thing was too close. I had to do something. I jumped up and shouted, "Nathan, wait!" The figure stopped moving and stood looking at me. In the dim light, I finally saw its features, and it took all my willpower to meet its gaze. It was a person, a middle-aged man, bald and with a thin beard. As for eye color, I couldn't really tell. All that showed were fathomless black pits of swirling ink that looked just like the sentient paint that we had been trying to cover up. Whatever was happening to this place, it seemed to have possessed one of the cleaners, and I had no idea what I was really looking at just then. There was a terrible pause, and I thought that I might have made a mistake. I had a feeling that it would rush me and envelop Jake and me in that terrible paint. But instead, I heard a choking, gasping noise. followed by the figure bending over and retching. In the next moment, torrents of the writhing paint left his body. And then the thing that had once been Nathan looked at me again. It cleared its throat and spoke.
You two, more people Mayhew brought to destroy my work. You can't be allowed to live. You can't be allowed to do this.
The figure lurched forward and I held up my hands. Wait. We were just hired to clean the place. The thing reached out its arms and snakes of paint began to unfurl and reach out. I thought that we were dead, but I reached for the trinket that I had just found and I held it out. Wait, was this you? Please tell us who we're really speaking to. The thing stared at me for another moment, and then at Jake as he silently rose to look at what was happening.
Where did you find that?
It rasped. Oddly, the thing's voice softened after seeing the locket.
Yes, my name was Samantha Gardner. I used to work here selling paintings that my sister Lily and I would make. The people loved our work, and for a long time this was a joyful place. And then that lecherous man, Mayhew, bought it and started extorting all the vendors. He started raising our rent for no reason, kicking vendors out who had been here for years, just because they wouldn't kiss his ass. Worst of all was what he did to the female vendors. The terrible face of the puppet Nathan went slack and I heard bones crunching as a fist balled up. I shuddered as I considered the entity's anger. After a while, enough of us got together and tried to get him ousted, but he took things to an extreme. He knew that I wouldn't let it go. He invited me here to talk it over and tried to come to an agreement, and then he killed me. My sister was horrified and she tried to get the police involved, but they couldn't prove anything. Mayhew ensured that it all looked like an accident. I thought that it was over. I was dead, but somehow Lily used her paints to bring me back. I don't know how it worked or how I'm here again, but what I do know is that I'll get that man for what he did to all of us. Hey, ghost man or lady, we only took this as a temp job. Mayhew sucks as far as we're concerned. He didn't tell us about any of this, so do you think if you'd let us go, we could, I don't know, maybe rough him up a bit for you or something? There's no need to hurt us, right? Jake asked. The figure paused for a moment as if considering. There was a brief glimmer of hope, but my heart sank when the figure shook its head. No, I'm sorry. You are too valuable to me as vessels. The others couldn't leave, this one is too broken. I don't need to trust someone who works for Mayhew when I can just wear them. Don't move. It's less painful if you don't resist. The creature staggered towards us again, arms outstretched, the terrible paint bleeding from its mouth. I pulled Jake away as a gout of black paint sprayed out from the thing and nearly covered him. We recovered quickly and burst out of the room, running away as fast as we could. I looked around as we fled and I saw that the walls were covered in more of the paint. It was dripping from the ceiling now like blood from a wound. We rushed back through the main hall and witnessed a horrifying sight. The walls were lined with more of the black paint. In each surface, the faces of the dead writhed in different states of decay. The sentient paint surged and writhed over everything, like a canvas of lost souls. We had to get out, but we knew that thing was still after us. I had another idea and it was a bad one, but we didn't have any options. Jake, do you have your lighter? I asked him. I mean, yeah man, why? What's the plan? He handed it to me. I considered just how crazy the idea was, but resolved to go through with it when I realized what might happen if we waited. Well, if this is one big painting and the canvas is keeping us in, why not burn our way out? We have gallons of paint thinner in the hall that Mayhew left, and a light source. I trailed off and Jake's look of concern changed to a manic and hopeful smile. Oh, it's crazy, dangerous, and stupid. I love it. Let's go.
We sprinted back to the front door, ignoring the terrible wailing coming from the images all around us. We got to the front door and saw the drums of paint thinner nearby. "Throw some," I called out to Jake. We doused the door with paint thinner, splashing it everywhere since his eyes were closed and he didn't want to look at the terrible faces that screamed back at him. "All right, back up," I shouted to him, and he stumbled back a few steps. I opened the lighter, struck a flame, and crossed my fingers. I threw the lighter, and after a moment, there was a burst of light as a small fireball flared into life. The stench of burning paint and charred wood was horrible. The faces melted away, then the paint, then parts of the door as the fire spread quickly from surface to surface. "Now we just have to get out of the burning building." I laughed as we saw the smoldering door. Suddenly, a terrible wail echoed through the hall as we saw the twisting form of Nathan being carried aloft by a small wave of living paint. The puppet thing spoke in the enraged voice of the slain painter.
You pathetic, monstrous savages. What have you done? My work, my life. You will burn it all down. There will be no justice for us all, no future, no more art.
I almost felt bad for the rambling specter, until the horrible face contorted in a rictus of hatred and the thing shrieked and charged at us. We had to go. I looked to Jake and he nodded. We both leapt at the burning door, feet outstretched in a synchronized kick. The door smashed open and we tumbled out into the cold night air. We gasped at the fresh air and scrambled away from the burning building. The paint monster continued wailing but could not follow us through the veil of flame. As we watched it burn, we saw the outside tendrils of paint begin to wither and dissipate, despite the lack of touching flame. "Should we call 911?" Jake asked. I considered it for a moment, and then I heard the shrieks inside of whatever still lingered. Nah, let it burn for a bit. We sat and watched the inferno for a while before we heard a car approaching and saw that it was Mr. Mayhew. He jumped out of his car and his face was pale. No, my building. What happened?" He stomped over to us angrily and Jake looked ready to engage, but I held a hand out to stop him and I spoke first. "So, I think a few details were omitted about this project, but I'm guessing we're not supposed to find out before we got turned into demonic meat puppets by the ghost of an artist that you murdered." Mayhew looked shocked that I just said it out loud. I followed it up and pressed. "And you thought that we would die in there like the others? What was the insurance policy that you had for Roger and Nathan? Was it a lot? How much was ours? Hopefully it was on par with whatever you'll get for this place burning down." I flashed a sarcastic smile and he fumed. Mayhew looked indignant and started to respond. "Oh no, it's not like that. The job needed to be done to keep me." He stopped and corrected quickly. "To keep the business safe. All the money just helped cover the expenses. It's not my fault they couldn't listen and stay safe." At that point, Jake was done with words, and just as Mayhew was looking smug at his own sense of superiority, Jake punched him hard in the face. The big man staggered and fell down. Jake was about to follow up, but I held him back when I saw that Mayhew had drawn a gun on us. He looked up at Jake with a bloody nose and hatred burning in his eyes. "I ought to kill you for that. But first responders are probably on the way and it wouldn't look good for the public. Plus, I think the fire may have contained it. I never thought to try it before since I couldn't be sure. I didn't want to let it out. But I think that it's gone." He looked around and smiled. "So I'll let y'all leave, but if you so much as say anything about this, I swear that I will." I interjected, pulling Jake away from jumping at the man again. Yeah, we won't. Go to hell." I pulled Jake away and took a few steps back from Mayhew, who huffed and put his gun away. He mumbled something about lawyers and got back in his car. "We just gonna let this murderer get away like that?" Jake said indignantly. I felt an odd tingling in my pocket and I removed the silver locket. I looked at it and smiled. No, it's fine, he can leave, but he won't be escaping justice this time. And Jake looked confused as I bent down to collect a small scrap of paper that lay by his feet. I wrapped the paper around the small locket and felt a disturbing sense of energy. I broke into a run and moved quickly to sidle up to the Oldsmobile as Mayhew was departing. I slipped the small fragment of paper into the seam of his trunk right before the car sped off. Jake ran up looking confused. "What was that?" he asked. I held up a hand and pointed to Mayhew as he drove away. I watched with a smile as lines of black paint started emerging from his trunk. Jake saw it too and his eyes went wide. "Oh wow, man, that's gonna be a fun reunion." I nodded my head silently. And Jake and I waited for a bit and then turned back to the van as we heard a crashing sound in the distance, followed by gunshots and a scream. "And do you think we could get proper jobs as painters, just to try it out?" Jake shrugged and chuckled. "Nah, something else next. Painting sucks.